Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Progressive Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Dottie, and I'm excited to share today's conversation with you. Today, I had the privilege and honor to speak with Tiffany Muller. She's the president of End Citizens United and Let America Vote. We talked about campaign finance reform, the influence of money in politics, and why these issues matter to all Americans, not just during election season. And we also touched on the Supreme Court's NRSC versus FEC decision and what it could mean for future campaigns. I do want to acknowledge there was some technical difficulties during the recording, and I really appreciate Tiffany's patience as we work through those challenges. I hope you'll stick with us because the conversation itself is very valuable. And if you enjoy interviews like this, guys, please like and subscribe and share it with someone who might find this helpful. I found it very helpful personally. And so I hope that she provides you with the same as well. I was nervous, so please don't get on my head for that. So again, you probably see, oh yeah, Dottie's nervous on this one, but I don't know. I never had somebody with Tiffany's stature. And Miss Tiffany probably don't even think that she's a big deal, but to me, she is. So again, I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Tiffany Muller. So I want to welcome everybody back to the Progressive Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Dottie. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest who took time in her busy schedule to join us. Her name is Tiffany Muller. She's the president of End Citizens United and Let America Vote. Her work isn't just about laws in Washington. It's about how those laws shape everyday life, from who voices get heard to policies that affect all of us. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Of course, of course. So, I think a lot of people hear the words campaign finance reform and immediately think that it's Washington. It really doesn't affect me. But again, people are really worried about paying rent, buying groceries, keeping up with healthcare costs. So I guess my first question is, why should the average American care where campaign money comes from?
Well, the first and foremost reason is because it's impacting the price that they pay for everything, right? Campaign finance reform can make your eyes feel like they want to glaze over and you just want to ignore it. But money in politics is really about corruption, and it's about the policies and that we choose to enact, right? So Congress can manage to find the largest tax breaks in U.S. history for billionaires and big corporations, but they can't manage to find help for everyday Americans to pay their rent or to bring in prescription drugs or to make sure that we actually can afford housing. These are policy points. And what we're seeing is that because the handouts from the government are going to the biggest donors, it is leaving everyone else behind. It is driving up your costs, and it is making it feel more and more out of touch with government.
Very much so. Politicians, they always say, get out and vote, your vote counts and stuff like that. And it's just hard when there's a distrust with the people in their government based on just a whole host of things. I mean, you constantly see, it seems like politicians are in it for the self-enrichment aspect, like, going to Congress, I'm going to get rich. My family's going to be took care of. They're going to have the best health care, things like that. And I think there's really just a separation from it. And I just wish that we had more public servants as politicians to come in and, just actually give the people what they want, actually hear them. And, but yeah, I am hopeful that we will come to that eventually. It's going to take time, but I think it really starts with actually addressing things like campaign finance reform and actually putting it in simple terms where people can actually understand it. Because I know, like, politicians have in corporate news too, they have a way of just telling it, but not really just saying it in a common sense fashion. And people just don't want to be like placated with words. They just want to just hear it. You know what I mean? And just say it in plain terms, and that's it, so.
They don't want to be lectured at either.
Yeah.
Like, they want someone just to see them. I mean, here we are as a kind of second generation where the American dream feels more and more, right? In my own family, I've watched 3 generations of the guys in my family are mechanics at a power plant. And every generation, it's gotten harder to make it, right? Because that American dream is slipping further and further. But the people are actually upholding their side of the work. They're working hard. They're working doubly. They're often pulling side gigs too, right? And yet what we see is that the ability to afford house or invest in future or go to college is more and more. So I think you're exactly right. And I think what voters have seen is like, Paxton Collier, all of you are going to Washington and you're not being Michaels. You're not sticking. And we see too much of the corruption there, right? Like an insider stock trading, lining their own pocket with information that isn't available to the average American. And then they're just up there making sure they get richer and richer while everyone else. And so I think it is no wonder that we're seeing anger, the desire for change, and why it is still why your vote is so powerful, because it is the way that it can hold them accountable at the ballot box. But it's really no wonder people are just like all in it.
Agreed. And, I feel like also too, we hear the phrase, Citizens United and, almost everybody recognizes the name, but I don't know that most people could explain like what it actually like means or what changed. So I guess my next question is plainly, could you kind of like explain what Citizens United is?
Well, so Citizens United was a January 2010 Supreme Court case that was decided by the conservative majority in a 5-4 decision. And it overturned 100 years of precedent. And it basically said corporations are people and money equals speech. And it put a for sale sign on our election, right? And opened the door to this unlimited, undisclosed record amounts of spending. And it gave corporations more power in our democracy election. And it also set up the path of abstaining for billionaires and other developmental interests to just buy a load, right? And so the corruption has been getting, the money has been getting, and policy people have just become a grid dysfunction, nothing, right? So that was January 2010. So 16 years. We at In Citizens formed as a response to the harm that we were seeing. And to we're a grassroots powered organization made up of more than 4 million members across the country. And our mission's really simple. We want to clean up the corruption. We want to get money out of politics. We want to get power back to.
That's so awesome. You know, it's just, again, I don't want to be like, I feel like I'm always on my show getting people like in this depressed state of just like, this is what's going on. And, and it's sad because we have to go out in everyday life and continue to act like stuff's normal and things are not normal. But I think we really get numb to the fact of the injustices. I just think that, we kind of just, I don't know, we just kind of just like keep going on like everything's okay. And it's just like, well, this is just how it's going to be. And I just refuse to think like this is the end result. You know what I mean?
Such an important point. Because the people who are benefiting from this race system want the rest of us to feel like there's nothing we can do, right? The more helpless we feel, the more hopeless we feel, the more profit they're putting in their pocket. And I actually believe that the only thing more powerful than money in politics is people in politics. And when we all join together and we keep fighting for change, sometimes it's inch by inch and it's going to take a long time to get there. But there are going to be these opportunities to make a big leap forward and big change forward. But that can't happen unless we are constantly working and drawing attention to these issues, holding people accountable, and all kind of leaning in for a democracy that actually represents them. So they want us to be popular. Therefore, we can.
100% agree. One thing I really try to do on this podcast is kind of connect, even though I'm not a Even though I don't write policy, I just feel like, connecting policy to everyday life is just so crucial. And, if listeners can't see themselves in the issue, then it's kind of hard for them to understand why it really matters. So, how does campaign finance affect things like housing and healthcare and wages and things like prescription drug?
Well, let's take housing, right? One of the reasons that we are seeing single family homes becoming more and more out of reach cost wise for the average family is because you see private equity and private venture firms buying up single family homes across the, and Congress has been unwilling to regulate that or to put restrictions around that because they are getting hundreds of millions from private equity firms and Wall Street and financial firms who are making money off of this right?
Right.
So single family are being priced out of the housing market, but private equity and Wall Street are making record profit. And Congress is doing nothing. They're supposed to be the watchdog, but they're doing nothing because they're casting those campaign checks, right? Let's say pharmaceuticals. Big Pharma spends $300 million in every election, and they have 1,500 lobbyists on Capitol Hill every single day. That is 3 for every member.
That's insane.
For every member. And those numbers are all huge, but they were a drop in the bucket when you think about the fact that they got a $42 billion tax break in the tax reconciliation. And they've been able to successfully fight back against the effort to negotiate prescription drugs, right? Even the big Democratic win a couple of years ago was only 10 drugs that they were willing to negotiate on, which means for so many people, prescription drug prices continue to rise, and they're having to make impossible choices between a drug that they need for their, or an energy bill, or groceries, right? And those are not choices that anyone should be making. And again, prescription drug prices, drug companies are making record profit. They have the money. We have the money as this is a policy.
Agreed. And it's so fascinating to always hear, politicians. I'm not gonna name anybody specifically, but I feel like, the listeners.
What about the when we name names?
Okay, well, Donald Trump, he always says, we're the most wealthiest nation in the world, and we have this and we have that, and America's so hot. And his campaign promise, like his agenda that he ran on, was to make America great. And, America first, putting American people's priorities first on the list. And he's done literally the opposite of everything that he promised on his campaign promise, and yet you still see his base is really still intact. And I really think outside of always talking about culture war stuff, I feel like that's such a distraction. So I feel like talking about policy implementation, how can we change the average American's life? Whether that's truck drivers, farmers, blue collar workers, white collar workers, whatever. I just feel like if we can actually get politicians in office who actually do the things that they say, then that will move the needle itself. You don't have to engage in the political theater then, because like people are actually feeling it in their wallets, they're feeling it in their everyday life. And I think that mentality will actually project the country forward. You know what I mean? Like I just think that like it's just kind of weird that every time we get close to a election cycle, all of a sudden you hear politicians come out the woodworks and start talking about kitchen table issues. And it's just like, what about the other 364 days? Not just the one day that everybody votes in November. All of a sudden, people come to a reality of like, okay, well, this is what the American people want, but like you haven't done anything within that time frame to address any of those problems. So the American people just think that you're using them as props. You know what I mean?
Right. And right now, what we're seeing is the most pay-to-play government we've ever seen in our history, right? I mean, Donald Trump and his family are plundering our government to line their own pocket. They've raised their collective net worth by billions and billions of dollars since taking this. And people are being left behind, right? And so he ran on one thing, bringing down costs. And now instead what we've seen, him just lining his own pocket, right? Record gas prices, record energy, housing prices continuing to rise, inflation costs continuing to rise, and no checks on things that are threatening people's jobs, like AI and outsourcing it. And so it is a real problem. And I think you're exactly right. If our government was responsive to the needs of the people, then that trust begins to be real. And it isn't just a transactional thing one day out of every 4 years to kind of get their vote. It becomes the kind of accountability cycle that our representative democracy was set up.
Exactly, 100%. And I know we're working with limited time, Miss Tiffany. Again, I just thank you so much for just coming on the show and just spreading your knowledge and informing us. So your team mentioned the recent Supreme Court decision, and I think it's a good opportunity to help people understand a headline that they may have seen but hasn't been explained. So why are some people calling the NRSC versus FEC? Is that it?
Yep.
Citizens United 2.0.
Well, because it actually allows for more billionaire money, more big money, more corporate money into our system, into our elections, right? And it's one more case where the Supreme Court has taken what limited guidelines we still have for on campaign finance and is throwing them out the window, all in favor of the biggest. And so it's going to continue to drown every day. And so this case is specifically of party committees and their limits to candidates and their ability to coordinate. And put in simplest terms, it now means that there's unlimited ability to funnel money to candidates, and it's one more avenue open for the biggest stone. So I think that we are going to see billionaires and corporations take advantage of this loophole, and Americans feel more left out. But we are going to continue to fight to get the right people elected to office who will then actually one of their, because that's how we begin to hold them accountable. And
Interesting. And now I think you answered my question. I was going to ask, how do supporters and critics see it differently? But again, this is why we have you, and, we have the platform that you're on and the Reform Group trying to take on all of this stuff. It's just, a lot of it's so overwhelming with information because everyday people doesn't have time to read court cases and, Supreme Court decisions because, they're, working honestly multiple jobs. They have kids, have, families and stuff like that. And it's really not the American people's job to always constantly have to read up on everything. You know what I mean? If you want to read it, research it, okay, cool. But I don't know. It's just like constantly, it seems like the American people are put forth and having to tackle all of these issues that the government that they're under always seems to just screw them over. And then the politicians getting into office, they say all the right things. And then when they get in office, they become corrupt. They sell their soul and, they start lobbying and all of this stuff. And so, again, I think what I take from this is, you guys are putting attention on it, call of action, and I think that is super important. And so I'm kind of interested to see where all this leads.
well, if folks want to learn more, they can go to endcitizensunited.org and join in the fight, right? We need volunteers. We have volunteers doing postcarding programs and phone banks and text banks. We have legislative and ballot measure fights across the country. And we have a list of candidates that we are endorsing and working with who are real champions on these issues, and that they're going to come to Congress or in their statewide office and make real change. So, Any Citizens United
Awesome. Awesome. I'll be sure to put that in the description also so the listeners can, just click on that link and see what it's all about. So, we talked a lot about what's frustrating people. I don't want to leave the listeners there. So, because of conversations like this, we should also leave room for hope also. So, could you tell us the Unrig Washington initiative and what it hopes to accomplish?
Yeah, this is one of the things that's given me hope this cycle. We started an Unrig Washington campaign, and it's three simple things. It is number one, that people will support a stock trading ban. Because look, if you're going to Congress, you should not be lying in your own pocket with the insider information. Number two, don't take corporate PAC money because the corporations already have a big enough seat at the table. And the people need to know you're working for them. And number three, end dark money, which means the undisclosed money that's flooding into our system and where someone's trying to hide their dough. Right. So that's the three simple things. Totally common sense. We have 259 candidates who have signed on, which is amazing. In 2018, there was kind of a wave of reformers that was elected, and we have 100 more candidates running on this issue today than we did. And so I believe that wave of reformers, that wave of change is going to be able to get really.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, if they always say follow the money. And a lot of these politicians I've read up on take a lot of APAC money. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But it's just like the incentives are elsewhere, the priorities are elsewhere. When you take money from these big corporate PAC firms or dark money PACs and it influences where you stand. But it's crazy because a politician, they come on corporate media news and they'll say, what the American people need, what they want, and things like that. But when it's time to you to go on the floor and actually vote for that piece of legislation and actually make it become law, you don't do it. You say all the right things, but when it's time to you actually put pen to paper, you don't do it. And I think, again, that's why so many Americans that aren't involved in process, the voting process, it makes them not want to even try to vote, try to change life for them, for their family, for their friends, materialistically. And I think, again, putting it plainly like you did, sharing those three concepts, I think does justice because, again, everybody has heard of those words before. So once you start connecting those dots, it starts to really start making impacts.
Well, the great thing is that there is so many candidates running on this issue and putting this issue front and center.
Yeah.
And folks can go on our website and find out about them.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So I know you have to go, Miss Tiffany. So as we wrap up, I always like to leave my listeners with something they can take with their conversation after the conversation ends. So is there one thing you hope people remember from today's discussion? What will it be? And, what's one thing someone can do this week to become more informed as a citizen?
Well, I hope what they know is that their voice matters. They're voice matters and they're vote matters. We all have a platform, even if it's just talking to our friends and neighbors and coworkers, and then having these conversations about money and politics and how it impacts your pocketbook and your wallet, right? And not just for holding members of Congress and candidates accountable for being sold out to donor matter. That's how we're going to make change. So I think number one is use your, even if that is just conversations with friends and family, coworkers, like use your phone. Number two, vote. It is still the most powerful tool. And so you have to vote. You have to vote for your friends and family and coworkers and neighbors are going to vote. And then number three, join the fight. Go to endcitizensunited.org. Come join us in this fight. All of us are going.
Awesome. Well, again, Ms. Tiffany, thank you for coming on the show today. Sorry about the technical. Yeah, of course. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I hope we could do this again so I can kind of oh, awesome. Give me a second chance at this. Tiffany Muller, she is the president of End Citizens United and the Let America Vote. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am.